Hello and welcome to the first video featuring our new tester, James Nemeth Jr. James brings a much needed high rev righty perspective to the channel, and it doesn't really matter whether you're one or two handed. If you've got a high rev rate, now you have something more familiar to watch with the typical technical analysis you expect from me. What we did was simulate the type of progression he would go through as the lanes transition. So rather than just a ball by ball, these are what we carry type of idea, it's more of a visual, applicable arsenal display and use case throughout transition, and I'll explain what he was thinking and the adjustment processes as we rotate through his arsenal, plus a few bonus balls just to get a look at a couple more balls from the catalog in his hands. Obviously, starting with the Infinite PhysiX, it's one of the strongest balls in the SPI catalog right now. This is the fresh league shot at Royal Crest Lanes in Lawrence, Kansas, and the Infinite isn't the prototypical long and flippy reaction you'd expect when you think Pearl PhysiX. The Infinite invokes thoughts of a stronger Rubicon, a stronger Codex, maybe an SPI version of a Jackal Ghost, etc. It's a very rolly, round, and continuous shape that's versatile and incredibly controllable. This makes it a great first ball out of the bag for a high-rev, high-speed player because it has the traction to create stability and make their power effective rather than erratic or uncontrollable, while also providing a strong benchmark type look on the high end of the bag. With James's rev rate, he can beat up a pattern in a hurry, and towards the end here you can see him continuing to move deeper. While the ball reaction looks great no matter where he's at, the angles were getting steeper than he'd have liked this early, which is something you need to pay attention to. If he just continues to chase it left, he might run out of room too quickly and trap himself, so he decided to ball down into the Nova. The Nova is also asymmetric, so he'll get similar torque from the core for a strong and consistent move down lane, but the cover formula is also quite a bit weaker, so you see here that on the same line as he finished with the Infinite, it's longer and sharper. However, the weaker cover allows him to move back right and play a more reasonable line so that he doesn't continue to force himself deeper than he'd like to be, this early in the set at least. As the lanes develop more friction, balling down into something weaker and cleaner counteracts or offsets that, so he has a very similar look to what he had before with the Infinite, just that's built for the stage of transition he's currently in. The track friction's getting pretty substantial now, and the Nova is a bit too clean and responsive because when he hits the friction it jumps, but if he goes around it the cover doesn't quite create enough traction, so he's going to make another ball change to the Axiom. The Axiom isn't in the catalog anymore, but features the strongest cover Storm makes on a symmetric core, so what this is going to do now versus the Nova is up the traction but drop the core torque for more blend left to right and more control front to back. Sharp eyes will see that while the friction in the track is trying to tug at it, the strength of the cover manages the wet-dry better. It gets more traction in the oil and is less sensitive to the dry, so he doesn't get the range of results he got with the Nova depending on where he threw it. There's a lot more stability. However, being that it's symmetric, he loses the torque, so as the lanes continue to transition, the Axiom will start hooking earlier but resist angle more. It's not built to cover boards, it's meant to get traction early and control the back end, and he has to play a tighter line to the pocket than he'd like. If he does give it a little room to the right, like he did on these last couple shots, it starts bogging down and getting lazy on the friction, which tells him he's got too much cover strength and it's time to ball down again. The next ball down is the Zen Soul. Also a strong symmetric core but with a weaker cover formula, so it's going to be cleaner up front and more responsive down lane. With the amount of transition he's created, now he can begin to start using the friction rather than having to avoid it or blend it. But the flip side is that, as you can see, he doesn't have the dig in the middle on the oil that the Axiom had. However, there's enough consistency now that he won't have the issue he did with the Nova where he had a lot of dry and a small area in between a lot of oil. Now the track is a lot more developed and the friction is a lot more consistent and predictable, so he can move back a little right and get on top of the friction rather than avoid it. The cleaner cover of the Soul versus the Axiom pushes the shape closer to the pins where it's more effective. It's not as early and slow, but still having a symmetric core keeps the down lane reaction more balanced and less volatile. He's getting virtually the same look as the Axiom, just again for this stage of transition. This is what the Axiom looked like when he started using it. The Soul being longer, sharper, and a little weaker would show those differences if compared side by side on a fresh condition, but being that the lanes are drier now, this is the whole point of having an arsenal and complementary ball reactions, so that as the lanes change, you can change equipment to help maintain the same look or general reaction throughout the transition as much as possible. As we watch here, you can see the same thing begin to happen to the Soul that happened to the Axiom. He's removing more oil from the lane, the ball's getting more traction earlier, which is beginning to make it hook early and labor down lane. This is a point I've continued to harp on in my videos. The amount of friction is is making the sole begin to burn up a little bit. There's too much for it now, so it's getting lazy because it's hooking too much too early, not because it's suddenly hooking less now than it did 10 shots ago. It also wouldn't begin to hook more as he moves deeper now to find more head oil. If it's not hooking from straighter, it's not going to suddenly hook more as he moves left. At this point, the angles are starting to get too steep again. He's losing some consistency, so he's going to ball down once more into the Zen, which is even cleaner and sharper than the Soul. No reason to spend much time here. We all know about the Zen by now. The extra length and friction response allows him to play more angle because it's not starting up so early. It's getting further down the lane and reacting more sharply to the dry, which there's an abundance of now. As the lanes dry out and force you inside like this, you need weaker, more responsive covers that get you more length and sharpness, which enables you to cover more boards. As we've seen him progress to weaker and weaker equipment and get deeper on the lane, this is absolute proof of that concept. You can't use board coverage to measure the strength of the ball. The Zen is helping to offset the track friction now by pushing through it early and making the corner at the break point. However, you can see the level of friction once again getting to the point where it's too much, and the Zen's getting a little too sensitive now, so let's ball down one more time. The IQ Tour should be a staple in every high rev bowler's bag. Same idea as an Axiom, just a big step down in cover strength and a small step down in core strength. Again, it's designed to produce a lot of control, but for a more medium volume of oil. It's not strong enough to dig through the heavy stuff. At this point, he's trying to avoid getting even deeper, so it's like when he went from the Nova to the Axiom. The Zen got a little too sensitive, so rather than make another jump left, he's going to try to stay in the same place but create more blend and control, which you can see is obviously the case. The IQ Tour is a lot more rounded and calm, I guess you could say, than the Zen. At this point, with where the transition's at and where he's at on the lanes, the IQ isn't built to cover boards, so this isn't the right ball to be in at this point. He mentioned that it would have been another option under the Nova rather than going to the Axiom. It would have allowed him to straighten out his angles because while he needed the blend of the Axiom at that point, he didn't necessarily need the strength, and that could have held the transition off longer. However, at the same time, as we move to the Hype Pearl, with his game, he feels more comfortable moving in and playing more angles, so while the IQ could have kept his angles more closed or straighter earlier, that's not necessarily his wheelhouse or comfort zone, so transition is usually his friend rather than his enemy. The Hype Pearl is a move more sideways than down from the IQ Tour because the strength level is very similar to the IQ, it's just longer and more responsive. It's like the Zen Soul to Zen relationship, where the difference is more in shape rather than hook amount. As you can see, it's doing virtually the same thing the IQ was doing from the same place on the lane, it's just doing it in a different way. The IQ was a little more difficult to place due to it being earlier and smoother, it made the angles too unforgiving, but was generally the right overall strength. With more length and more response, but similar strength, he's found a favorable and efficient shape, and at this point, it's a very comfortable look that he'll be able to stay with for an extended period of time. If you like his jersey, Rosdahl 10 gets you 10% off your order at checkout at CoolWick. The code's in the description to copy and paste. Follow my Bowler's Mart link in the description for your bowling needs that associate your purchases with me, which helps me out quite a bit, so thanks for using that. Check out the SRGBBFS group on Facebook for all things SPI, and of course, thanks to Turbo and especially Storm for their support. Also, the new Super Thanks button below the video on the line with the like and share buttons allows you to leave me a tip other than that canoes don't paddle themselves. If you like seeing James, let me know by liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. I try not to mention that stuff much, but realistically it lets me know what you like, what you want to see more of, and it lets the companies that sponsor me know that their support is justified and valued. Big shout out and major thanks to all my Patreon subs and my great Discord community that I don't talk about or thank nearly enough. Thank you for watching, and may the strikes be with you.